Welcome to the Two Gurus Top Compliance Podcast with me, Christy Granthart. I'm here with the one and only Tom Fox. This week, we're covering whether people aged 45 to 55 are in late career, Gen Z's newfound appreciation for corporate jobs, a big crackdown on Chinese imports allegedly linked to modern slavery, and a Florida couple's attempt to laminate torn lottery tickets to claim a $1 million prize. We'll see how that went. But first, Tom, how has your week been? What do you think is the most interesting development?
My wife is conferencing this week, so I am bacheloring it, and
Oh,
I've got the dogs, and we're one big happy family.
good times. All
So
right.
the last time she had to go for a week, I washed and I did some things I typically don't do, and she came back and said, "You're busted. You can do these things." So anyway,
Perfect. All right. Where do you
yeah,
want to start today?
I want to start with what me worry and why me retire because I love the premise on both ends of this story. It started off with just a tone deaf LinkedIn posting, which categorized three age groups 21 to 25, 45 to 55, and 55 to 65 as follows: 21, 25 exploration, 45, 55 a late career, and my personal favorite 55, 65 in decline. I'm not quite sure what 66 plus is, but it wasn't listed. And spoiler alert, I'm not in any of those categories. So I found that part very interesting. But the other part that I really did want to explore with you, Christy, is the title of the article is What Me Retire Just Because I'm 80. And the point of the article was if you're in good health and you can contribute and you still have your facilities, you there's no reason for you to retire if you don't want to. And that having moved into closer to that than I'd care to admit, I certainly understand that. On the other hand, there's a huge bubble of new workers coming into the workforce. And for people that are maybe 35 to 45 and they're going to a conference that Tom Fox has spoken at multiple years, should they get a slot to speak? Or should someone who's supported that organization for multiple years speak? And I don't pretend to know the answer to that question, but it's an open question because we've talked many times on this podcast about five generations being in the workforce. We may have to go with six if we're going to talk about people up to 80. Um, and with healthcare increasing, becoming increasingly more affordable, more better, if that's a word, and more available, I think we could see people who can, if they choose to, work that hard. My grandfather died cutting hair. My dad retired at 87. I'm not sure I'll beat my dad, but I'm in competition with him in all things. So I can certainly see that. Now, it may be I'm writing books. It may be that I'm down to one podcast with you, but I'm still looking to work. And I, it really is an open question. And it's something that employers are going to have to take a look at. And then companies that have mandatory retirement ages are going to have to take a look at. So I got started with hopefully this. I don't pretend to know the answer, but I just see an open question. And companies are going to have to figure out how do I keep on these people who are still contributing, yet build for the future with younger employees who need to take up the mantle of leadership, either in their mid 30s or mid 40s or their mid 50s. So maybe I've asked more questions than I've given answers, but that's why I was so intrigued by this article.
Maybe there are more questions than answers, I think. First of all, the Indeed.com piece is infuriating. It just really is. There's so many boomers who are still in the workforce. Apparently, they are so unimportant that it's a blacked out, doesn't even get a category group or the late Gen Xers. But honestly, the idea that like 55 to 45 to 55 is generally considered going into your peak earning years. The idea that it's late career is something that I imagine many chief compliance officers, general counsel, and other people in our profession would take serious issue with. But it's interesting that the issue of mandatory retirement ages, I've seen it be very beneficial, certainly in the law firms that I worked at. Some of the lawyers just they never want to retire and they really need to. And I think that it can be a good way of managing out folks that maybe think that they're still with it and maybe aren't as much as they should be. I don't know. What do you think about mandatory age restrictions?
And you're absolutely spot on. I've seen that happen more times than I want to think about.
Yeah.
And particularly in law firms, which are private by nature entities, and someone stays on too long, they shouldn't be there. They get the firm into trouble, kind of all of those things. And in the corporate world, hopefully there are more safeguards around that because you're not a partner and an owner of the firm like you may be in a law firm or a shareholder and an owner of the firm. But and you're spot on that there need to be guardrails around that, and maybe that's a good reason for a cap or a top end age for a board of director or senior executive, but 60, 65 may be too young now, and people may want to work longer. But I guess, Chrissy, where I think about my daughter, and I think you were a general counsel in your 30s, I was in my 40s. But if there's 3 generations above that, there may not be room for her in her field to be the equivalent in her 30s or even in her 40s. And that you hear a lot Gen Xers talking about. We got the boomers and I'm between the boomers and the millennials. What about me? And so more questions. Sorry.
More questions and answers. Don't you worry, folks listening. We will continue to grapple with the hard questions here on Two Gurus Talk Compliance, because that is definitely one. Shall we go to another hard question, Tom?
You bet.
Yeah. And this one is actually from a Wall Street Journal article dealing with a major policy announcement from the Biden administration relating to forced labor. So, as all you savvy listeners to the Two Gurus Top Compliance podcast know from our previous episodes, there is a loophole in the current enforcement for what is called the de minimis exception to tariffs and package review from China. And here's how it works. So, if the package coming out of China to the United States is worth less than $800, tariffs don't apply to it, and no one is checking it at the border. So the theory is that there can't really be that many problems with these low value shipments. And there are tons of these types of shipments, especially to individuals or of things like clothing, right? Two major retailers that are of concern are Temu and Shein, which sell extremely low cost textiles and clothing into the US. They're able to send much of these products without any scrutiny or concern for the materials coming from, say, the Xinjiang region of China, potentially with forced labor, as the textile industry it's rampant in that industry. But in addition to problems like forced labor, shipments of fentanyl have also been found in packages that don't require scrutiny. So both the Republicans and the Democrats have been urging the Biden administration to close this loophole. However, they have different ideas, of course, about how this should be done. But people opposed to closing the loophole note that it will cost a whole lot of money to look at every one of these packages valued at under $800. Some estimates are that it'll cost between $8 and $30 billion of US taxpayer funds. So, look, I'm excited that they're going after this exception, especially when it comes to clothing and textiles. But I do recognize just how expensive a solution this is, Tom. Do you think it's worth closing this exception given the cost?
I think absolutely so. I think it was a loophole that was exploited. It's going to put pressure on companies to make these assurances. And I think that's where it belongs. And if companies have to have increased cost or whatever the case may be, it was clearly a loophole that was being exploited. Until I read this article, I wasn't aware of the fentanyl. I was more concerned with the under $800 and exactly the points you raised on the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. Nobody's looking, nobody's thinking. If it's, I have looked at the TMU site, they are very cheap, which means they got to cut their costs somewhere. And if your labor's free, guess what? It can do a lot of things price wise. And that's a clear red flag. So I applaud this effort. I think you're spot on. I think actually for the maybe first time this year, I'll say Congress is spot on. And I think it was a loophole that needed to be closed. And I applaud both sides of the aisle for doing so.
Amazing. Let's stick with China, scarier version of what's going on over there. Tom, tell us about a disappearing man.
Yes, actually, this is fortunately a story a little bit too told too often in China, where a senior executive or CEO goes away and never comes back. And that's happened to a Chinese bank. And then they got an order from the Chinese government to wire $11 million somewhere to someplace they didn't know without an invoice or a reason except do it. Now it's China. So if they do it, maybe they won't get into trouble. Maybe they will. If it was in the United States, you would definitely get into trouble. I think you're right. It's just a terrifying story. The crackdown internal in China, whenever I think about what they've done to Westerners, and that's bad. AstraZeneca had employees arrested this week, or at least questioned as part of an investigation. What they're doing to Chinese citizens is much worse. And this is just the most recent story that I could find for this episode of our recording.
So I was looking deeper into this, and Tom, the CNN said that they think that he was taken by the anti-graft watchdog agency, which seemed a very strange group of folks to be disappearing a person, who then apparently withdrew from all his roles, despite the fact that he can't be found, withdrew from his official job roles. I'm not sure how one does that when they can't be found, but this the anti-graft watchdog agency? Do you think that it's somebody else? Is this them trying to enforce anti-graft? What do you think's going on here?
It's part of the anti-graft campaign. In China, all things started in with the Communist Party. So I'm sure the Communist Party was in on this, and at least the decision to disappear this individual. And if the anti-graft agency doesn't have its own enforcement police, they'll just get Chinese Communist Party picks up the phone and calls the police and says, "Go do what these people say," and you disappear.
Yeah, sometimes very happy to be living where I live.
How's that Spark Consulting office in China going?
Unlikely to be opened.
Unlikely.
Unlikely to be opened. Okay. So let's go from a terrible idea to a not as good one, but it doesn't have the same kind of dire circumstances around it. And that's actually around the world of clawbacks, ethics violations, and an illicit workplace affair. Tom, this article comes from Fortune and it's titled An Affair Cost Alan Shaw His Job and Severance. Will Norfolk Southern also try to claw back his pay? And obviously, we've been paying a lot of attention to clawbacks around here because the SEC is very focused on it. So, Mr. Shaw was the married CEO of the Norfolk Southern Railroad Company when he started an affair with the chief legal officer and company secretary. So, Mr. Shaw was her boss, which meant that their relationship was a violation of the company's code of conduct. Tip offs, they started sharing cars on trips, business trips, and suspiciously, when they were on these trips with the rest of the executive team, the two of them would stay at a different hotel than everyone else. This affair was rather costly for Mr. Shaw. Not only was he fired, but since it was for cause, he lost a whole heap of money. Specifically, he lost all of the benefits in his severance plan, including over $10 million in stock options, as well as $2.2 million in cash. The question the article asks is whether Norfolk Southern will attempt to claw back any of Mr. Shaw's pay. The article notes that the SEC has, of course, been quite keenly focused on clawbacks for public company executives. Now, in response to that pressure, many companies have proactively adopted clawback provision if executives engage in misconduct. And unfortunately for Mr. Shaw, Norfolk Southern is one of those companies. According to Fortune, I found this really interesting. Tom, clawback fights, of course, are bitter. And as of the publishing of the article, since the beginning of last year, 16 companies have attempted clawbacks from 19 different executives. Eight of those resulted in a clawback. Seven are still pending. Two were unsuccessful, and one company didn't disclose the outcome. So this is quite a soap opera, Tom. Do you think Norfolk Southern with it's really hard to say that for me. I don't Norfolk Southern will attempt to claw back, and do you think they should?
That's the first time I've ever heard your California ishness trip make you trip over a word. So let's set a little more context because for those who may think that the name of Mr. Shaw is familiar, it is because Norfolk Southern was the train company that derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, causing a massive chemical spill, massive fines and penalties, caused the Congress to actually change safety regulations. That's how bad it was. And it turns out he was having an affair. So there's a lot going on here. And I don't think in the past we have seen clawbacks around conflicts of interest such as this, if I can delicately put it that way. But I thought long and hard about this. If he violated the code of conduct or the compliance program for his role in the train derailment, how is that any different than him violating the code of conduct by having an affair with an underling? or not reporting it if appropriate within the context of whatever he had to do in the company. It's still a violation and it's still should be subject to, although it may be an affaire de la heart as opposed to affaire de la train derailment. So I think we could see Norfolk Southern move towards this. And I think it would be consistent with what we've seen in the past. It would just be, if not the first, one of the biggest, most public first attempts at clawback for a violation of the code of conduct, which was an interoffice affair.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. This does have a little bit of a slippery slope sense about it to me. It's not criminal behavior, but at the same time, code of violations are code violations. So I think we should watch this and see what happens.
I'm sure we will, given our prurient natures.
Yeah. What's the
So
next
let me
song?
talk to you. Let me talk about Glencore for just a minute. And here I want to talk about the traders who have been charged criminally by the Serious Fraud Office. They all went to court this past week and pled not guilty. And it's going to be a fascinating case if it does go to trial, where you have individuals, it brings out, especially individuals who have some sort of insurance coverage and they can have an unlimited defense fund. They will brook no stone unturned to defend their clients as they should. That's where we are. They simply pled not guilty, but it's going to be fascinating for us to watch from the outside.
Indeed. We started with our 80-year-olds. Let's go back to our Gen Zers, or Zetters as they call them in Britain. Apparently the tide is turning, Tom. So when it comes to work, that generation is apparently learning to love their corporate jobs. So this article made me laugh. It was really very interesting and slightly silly. It comes from the Wall Street Journal, titled 20-somethings Learn to Love Their Corporate Jobs. So the article follows several TikTok influencers who publicly love their jobs so much that they create exciting content around things like free coffee at the office and the joys of avocado toast eaten at their desks. I'm not kidding. They actually had footage from some of these popular TikToks where people are literally just kind of filling in Excel sheets. Well, the article notes that this generation is deviating from the path chosen by millennials when they were in their 20s. So the Gen Zers are staying longer in their early jobs, 18% longer than the millennials did at that age. And female TikTok influencers of this genre call themselves corporate girlies who love the benefits of office life. This includes things that they quoted, such as listening to music and podcasts at work. Maybe they're listening to two gurus, you never know. Wearing cute outfits and having weekends off. Tom, I think that this probably bodes well for the future compliance officers of the world, because obviously people who are engaged in their jobs and enjoy them are more likely to work hard and care about culture. How are you seeing this trend?
I agree with you that it's positive, but I see it as a different underlying reason for two reasons. First is something we've always had, which is one generation goes the opposite way of the one before it. That's not new. But what is new for the Gen Zers is or was the pandemic. They lost years, whether it was in school, it could have been as low as, I guess, middle school, but certainly high school or college. They could have lost a significant amount of early work life in a corporation at the office. And my daughter, she loves going to the office.
Is she a corporate girly?
Hard for me to
she
think
may not
and or
she may not self-describe that way. I actually hope she doesn't. But anyway, yes.
kind of hard for dad to think of his daughter as a corporate girly. Let me just say that. At least I don't want to. Anyway, and she enjoys it. She likes being around people. She likes the camaraderie. She doesn't mind the commute. She listens to non-podcasts on the command or reads. So that it's just, I think that, and she's told me she is mad, still mad about the pandemic because she had to go her last basically 3 years of college remote. And she feels like she lost something from that. And something that I think you and I both think is very valuable, which is physically being at a university. And so I think there's a lot more coming out of the pandemic that we're just beginning to realize. And I think this is one of them.
That's a really interesting take on this, Tom. I think you're probably right. I think it does bode well for corporations going forward. But doesn't audits. Why don't you tell us about the AOB, Tom?
So the PCAOB, it's a part of the SEC that regulates auditors, and they told major audit firms that audit over 100 public companies, you have to have an outsider now on your board to oversee your audit quality. That's as a slap in the face as you can get. You name the industry, you now have to have an outsider come in and do your consulting quality, your compliance quality, your law firm quality, your supply chain quality, whatever quality it is you're delivering, you now have to have an outsider. And I think we've both read about a large number of audit problems. And PwC has now been banned in China because of Evergrande, their audit. We talked about other audit failures here on this podcast in Wirecard or in the United Kingdom. And the PCALB is saying is doing something at least, but I just view this as one big slap in the face.
Man, okay. I have a lot to say about this.
All right.
The executive president of the U.S. Chamber was quoted in the article saying, quote, the PCAOB is pursuing a very expansive agenda. I agree with that part, without articulating what problems they're trying to solve, unquote. So let me see. On our podcast over the last couple of years, we've covered several firms involved in bribery scandals, especially in South Africa, cheating scandals in, I think it was Norway and several other places where they're handing out the codes and handing out the answers, and frankly, straight up incompetency. I'm pretty sure I could give that guy a list of the things they're trying to cure with this. I cannot think of another industry where it is so impermeable to the effects of misconduct. And I am glad that they're doing something, but I'm not sure it's going to make a difference. We live in this place where there is no competition and it's so structured to make sure that these firms are the only ones that can compete, and then they don't do a good job. I don't understand the dynamic of it and how it's supposed to keep going this way.
All of the above.
Well, keep working hard, SEC. I appreciate you for trying. And you're also trying, SEC, with another good direction here. The SEC has recently issued press releases stating that it has charged 7 publicly traded companies with violations of its whistleblower protection rules. Now, the SEC has been on a tear against companies misusing separation agreements with employees that impede whistleblowers from reporting potential misconduct to the SEC. We covered that last year for sure. These 7 companies have agreed to pay more than $3 million in combined civil penalties. So not huge money, but still, what they did was kind of egregious. So some of these companies had in their terms in the separation agreement that employees were required to waive the right to possible whistleblower monetary awards if they took information about misconduct to the SEC. That's bad. The SEC made it clear that Rule 21F-17A prohibits any action to impede an individual from communicating directly with the SEC staff about possible securities law violations. That's how, in California, in response to all the Hollywood scandals, we now have a law stating that essentially confidentiality cannot be enforced. And you can't require an employee in a separation agreement regarding, say, claims of sexual harassment to keep quiet, which frankly makes a lot of sense. And the SEC's action here makes sense to me as well. We really have to protect people's ability to tell regulators about misconduct. What do you think about this?
I agree. The thing that struck me was this was not inane conduct. This was intentional conduct to dissuade employees from going to the SEC. I don't think that provision is contractually valid, meaning certainly the company can't block the SEC from paying. And I don't think a company can require an employee not to get paid by a third party. I just don't think that's a valid contract. Now, whether it's valid, if it's not valid, it's clearly a nefarious intention because they're just trying to scare somebody into not doing something. If they think it is a valid defense, then it moves from simply nefarious to inane. That's shown by the fine and penalty. But these companies, whistleblowing is as important as any other part of a compliance program. And if your company says you, Mr. or Ms. or other employee, can't avail yourself of it, that's creation of a toxic culture, which is only going to make the company a worse place to work.
Absolutely. I think that they're doing smart things here. And folks, anybody who doesn't know what your standard employee separation agreements look like, go call legal, find out, and make sure that these kind of conditions aren't in those separation agreements because they'll come back and bite you.
Okay, so this next article I selected, and it's called The Way Forward for ESG. And Christy, the reason I picked this one is I want people to understand no matter what the right wing MAGNA hat wearing idiots say or do, even in the great state of Texas, you're not going to stop ESG because it's too much of a business um, strategy. What ESG says is we're going to have somebody look at these disparate components of our company, one under E, one under S, and one under G, and we're going to put some risk management strategies around it. No more, no less. And the great state of Texas says, well, you can't evaluate those factors. Horse hockey, you have to evaluate those factors because they're all risks for a corporation. Good governance is as important as the safety of employees, as important as the financial penalty or loss you're paying for your energy spend. That's what the E part's about. And so, what this article suggested is you can look at all of these. And when businesses want something done, that's when things change. And ESG is really a business imperative. It doesn't matter what we call it, but with the ESG framework, you typically would have a head of sustainability or a corporate board who may be providing oversight. You'd have one group who's looking at all of these risk factors. And I hope that structure is still in place because they are risk factors and they're risk factors that need to be evaluated. And this article shows that companies are going to look at those factors, whether those are PE firms looking for investment, whether those are banks lending money, whether those are people buying shares of a company, whether it's getting money off the secondary market. You're going to be evaluated for how you are managing those risks. ESG is here to stay. And I think that there's a way forward for it. And the way forward is exactly what this article portends, business to business.
The article also talked about the possibility that index fund customers, places the huge ones like at BlackRock or Vanguard, be able to essentially vote their shares based on different values. And their examples were ESG related values, pro labor, Catholic values. I think it's an interesting idea, Tom. Do you think it would be that kind of thing would be widely adopted? Would that help the ESG as it suggests?
I go to the corporate roundtable statement on the purpose of a corporation, articulating their five sets of stakeholders. Certainly their shareholders, but they're also your customers, your employees, the places you do business, and your third parties. And if an interest fits within one of those sets of stakeholders, I think that's a legitimate evaluation strategy. And if you want to vote that because you feel like it makes the company better, I think that's fair as well.
All right, Tom, shall we finish our fun fest with Florida?
Couple.
Couple. This time we have Florida man and Florida woman who plotted to use a taped together, ripped up lottery ticket to claim a $1 million scratch off prize. So, our Florida couple turned in a lottery ticket that was described as crudely pieced together with tape, combining two different losing tickets that had been torn up, and they laminated them together to show a winner. So, Florida woman filled out the back of the ticket with her name and information to claim the prize, and she had to check a box saying she understood she could face legal charges if the information was incorrect. She got tired of waiting for her prize to come in the mail, so she called the lottery office for an appeal. They asked her to come in to claim her prize, and when she got there, she was separated from her boyfriend, who was part of the plot. Both were interviewed about what had happened, but they hadn't gotten their story straight. They both told big tales of how the ticket came to be. One said it was ripped when it fell out of the car. The other said it had gotten wet when they were trying to scratch it, and that's when it ripped. Apparently, officials didn't believe our Florida woman when she described this as insane and blowing her mind that the lottery tickets didn't go together despite the barcodes not matching. The Florida man and Florida woman are being held on bail for larceny, grand theft of $100,000 or more for trying to claim a $1 million prize. Whoops, they thought it was a winner. But sadly for our Florida couple, the lottery ticket was a one-way ticket to jail.
Florida couple. I love it.
Florida couple, thank you so much for joining us this time on Two Gurus Talk Compliance. I'm Christy Grant Hart.
And I'm Tom Fox.